In 2006, an American factory worker could walk into a showroom and finance a brand new chopper for more than $30,000. Stretched frame, fat rear tire, 117 cubic inches of chrome-drenched V-twin, custom paint laid on by hand. He didn't need to be rich. He barely needed a down payment. 4 years later, that same motorcycle was worth a third of what he owed on it, if he could find a buyer at all. At the peak of the boom, close to 100 American companies were building motorcycles like that one. Factories in Kansas and Texas running full shifts, television cameras in the workshops, builders signing autographs like rock stars, and their machines selling for more than houses in half the country. And then, in the space of about 3 years, nearly all of it was gone. The factories, the shows, the money, the celebrity, a whole industry, and a whole moment in American culture wiped out so fast that people still argue about what actually killed it. Because here's the thing. The chopper boom wasn't really a story about motorcycles. It was a story about television and easy money. And what happens when America falls in love with something all at once? This is the decade motorcycle culture went insane. And the bill that came due. To understand how strange the 2000s were, you have to remember what the custom scene looked like before television found it. Through the 80s and 90s, building choppers was an underground craft. It lived in two-car garages and small shops with grinder sparks on the floor. The men who did it, and it was mostly men, mostly self-taught, were welders, machinists, painters. Guys who could look at a stock frame and see something leaner and meaner hiding inside it. Legends existed, sure. Arlen Ness had been turning metal into sculpture since the 60s. Every region had its wizard, the guy whose bikes made a parking lot go quiet. But nobody was famous. Not really. The custom builder was respected the way a great tattoo artist was respected, inside the culture, invisible outside it. A magazine feature was the peak of glory. The work was the point. And underneath that little world, something bigger was heating up. The 90s were boom years for American motorcycling in general. Harley-Davidson, the company that had nearly died, a story I tell in my video on the AMF years, had come all the way back, and then some. By the late 90s, there were waiting lists for new Harleys, dealers charging over sticker price and getting it. The baby boomers had hit their peak earning years, the kids were grown, the mortgage was manageable, and millions of American men decided it was time to finally buy the bike they'd wanted since they were 19. Money, nostalgia, and horsepower were all piling up in the same garage. All it needed was a spark. The spark had a name, a shaved head, and a shop in Long Beach, California. In 2001, the Discovery Channel aired a documentary called Motorcycle Mania about a young builder named Jesse James, a descendant, the legend went, of the outlaw himself, hammering out handmade choppers at a shop called West Coast Choppers. Nobody at the network expected much. It was a cheap documentary about a welder. It became one of the biggest things Discovery had ever aired. Executives looked at those ratings the way prospectors look at a gold pan. Within a year, Jesse James had his own series, Monster Garage. And Discovery went hunting for more men with torches and attitudes. They found them in a metal shop in upstate New York. A barrel-chested, walrus-mustached steel shop owner named Paul Teutuls Sr. and his son, Paul Jr., building custom bikes under the name Orange County Choppers. In 2003, American Chopper hit the air. And America, not Motorcycle America, all of America, lost its mind. Millions of people tuned in every week. People who had never ridden, never wanted to ride, couldn't tell a carburetor from a coffee can. They came for the bikes and stayed for the family, the father and son screaming at each other across the shop floor, the slammed doors, the impossible deadlines, and then, at the end, the reveal. Some rolling piece of chrome sculpture shaped like a fire truck, a fighter jet, a tribute to fallen soldiers. Think about what television had actually discovered. It wasn't motorcycles. It was the last unscripted American workshop. Real men, real steel, real fire. At the exact moment reality TV was eating the schedule. The chopper was just the most photogenic thing ever built in a garage. Discovery stacked the deck. Biker build-off put legendary craftsmen head-to-head. Builders who had spent 30 years in respected obscurity, men like Indian Larry, a genuine artist who could ride a wheelie standing on the seat, were suddenly getting mobbed at airports. For a craft that had lived its whole life underground, the sunlight was blinding and intoxicating and worth an absolute fortune. Here's where the story stops being about television and starts being about money. Because what happened next follows the same script as every American mania from tulips to tech stocks. It just happened to be wearing leather. Demand went vertical. Every man watching American Chopper on a Tuesday night wanted one. Not a Harley, a chopper. Stretched, raked, loud, and utterly impractical. And true customs, the real handmade article, cost $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 and took months to build. The waiting lists ran years. So an industry rose up to sell the dream at scale. They called them production customs, factory-built choppers, cataloged and warrantied, chrome by the container load. The king of them sat in Wichita, Kansas. Big Dog Motorcycles, founded by Sheldon Coleman Jr., heir to the Coleman camping empire, who had started modifying bikes in his garage in the mid-90s. By 2005, Big Dog was no garage. It was a 175,000 square foot factory. 300 employees, more than 5,000 motorcycles a year, and over $120 million in revenue. Down in Fort Worth, American Iron Horse was running the same play just as hard, stretched Texas choppers with hand-laid flame paint rolling off an assembly line. And around those two giants, the gold rush. By the peak, somewhere near 100 American companies were stamping out chopper-style motorcycles, an entire parallel industry built in half a decade, selling $30,000 and $40,000 toys. Now ask the obvious question: who was buying 5,000 Big Dogs a year at those prices? Regular guys. That's who. Electricians, contractors, sales managers. And they were buying them the same way America was buying everything in the mid-2000s, with the house. Home values were climbing so fast that the equity felt like free money, and the banks were handing it out like Halloween candy. Pull 40 grand off the home equity line, roll it into the driveway on Saturday. The bike wasn't a purchase. It was a lifestyle announcement, financed against a housing market that everyone knew could only go up. Walk through any rally in 2005 and you could see the fever. Rows of showroom fresh production choppers, barely broken in. Chopper t-shirts, chopper energy drinks, chopper video games. OCC merchandise on kids who would never touch a wrench. The Teutuls built theme bikes for Fortune 500 companies while cameras rolled. The chopper, the outlaw's machine, the thing your mother warned you about, was now corporate America's favorite mascot. Some of the old builders looked around at all of it and felt something curdle. The craft had become content. The prices had left Earth. And every year, the machines got longer, lower, shinier, and harder to actually ride, because they weren't really being built to ride anymore. They were being built to be looked at. And an economy built on being looked at lasts exactly as long as the audience. Then, in 2004, the boom got its funeral bell, though almost nobody heard it at the time. Indian Larry, the purest craftsman television had ever put in front of America, a man the other builders revered, died after a stunt went wrong at a show appearance in North Carolina, performing for the crowd the cameras had brought him. The scene mourned hard, and more than a few people quietly wondered what exactly this new famous version of their world was costing. 4 years later, everyone found out. The first domino didn't wait for Wall Street. In the early weeks of 2008, before Lehman Brothers, before the bailouts, before most Americans could spell subprime, American Iron Horse shut its doors in Fort Worth. Creditors dragged what was left into bankruptcy court that spring. The second biggest production chopper maker in the country was dead before the crisis even had a name. Because the chopper industry didn't just get hit by the housing collapse. The chopper industry was built on the housing collapse. The same inflated equity, the same easy credit, the same sunny arithmetic. When home values rolled over, the money for $40,000 toys didn't shrink. It vanished. And the men who owed more on the house than the house was worth were not shopping for a second motorcycle. They were selling the first one. That's when the used market turned into a horror show. Thousands of nearly new production choppers hit the classifieds at once, chrome barely smudged, and found almost no buyers. Bikes that had cost $35,000 traded for a third of that, then less. Owners mailed keys back to lenders. For years afterward, one of the best bargains in American motorcycling was somebody else's 2006 Dream, repossessed. The factories bled out in stages. Big Dog fought longest. Coleman borrowed heavily, cut deep, and held on through 3 brutal years. But you can't sell 5,000 rolling luxury statements a year into a country that just lost its shirt. In April 2011, the bank foreclosed. The company that had employed 300 people at its peak had 22 left on the final day. The world's largest builder of custom motorcycles, gone. And the show that started it all? Television found one last thing to film. In 2009, Paul Sr. sued his own son over control of the company, and the family feud that had been the show's charming engine became a genuine, ugly public war. Cameras rolled on that too. Of course they did, right up until there was nothing left to shoot. The original run ended. Revivals came and went. Years later, Sr. himself filed for personal bankruptcy protection. The massive headquarters built at the top of the boom passed out of the company's hands. By the early 2010s, you could stand in Sturgis. I've told the story of what Sturgis itself became in another video, and count the choppers on one hand. The rows of raked front ends were gone like they'd been raptured. A whole visual era of American motorcycling erased from the street in less time than it took to build. Now, the easy version of this story has a clean moral. Television ruined the chopper. Reality TT found something pure, strip-mined it for ratings, inflated it into a bubble, and left a crater. Plenty of old builders will tell you exactly that, and they've earned the right. But hold that story up to the light, because a second one is standing behind it, and both things are true. Television didn't invent the money. The chopper bubble was inflated by the same forces inflating the entire American 2000s, the home equity ATM, the no-doc loan, the national certainty that prices only rise. If Discovery had never aired a single frame, cheap credit would still have found its way into the garage, the way it found its way into granite countertops and boats and second homes. The chopper wasn't the disease. The chopper was a symptom with better paint. And here's the part the purists don't love to admit. The boom was also glorious. For one strange decade, motorcycle craftsmen, welders, painters, fabricators, men who work with their hands, were prime-time American heroes. Millions of people who would never have looked twice at a motorcycle learned the names of the men who built them. Kids watched fathers and sons build things out of raw steel on television, and some of those kids picked up a wrench because of it. Money poured into a craft that had survived on fumes for decades, and some of the metalwork produced in those years was genuinely the best the art form has ever seen. The custom scene got famous, got rich, got ruined, and got humbled. And it's not obvious it would trade the memory back. So the boom nearly destroyed the craft. And the boom gave the craft the biggest audience it will ever have. The cameras and the credit built the golden age and the graveyard with the same hands. That's not a contradiction you can resolve. That's just America in the 2000s on two wheels. Here's the quiet ending nobody televised. When the factories closed and the cameras left, the craft did what it had always done. It went back to the garage. The builders who'd been building before the boom were, mostly, still building after it. Smaller, cheaper, humbler machines. Bobbers instead of 8-foot choppers. The scene's center of gravity moved back to where it had started. Guys making things with their hands because they couldn't not. The machines survived too. Those orphaned big dogs and iron horses are still out there, and the men who bought them for pennies on someone else's dollar got real motorcycles, S&S power, steel fenders, honest paint, under all that history. And the boom left one more thing behind. Proof. Proof that America would sit down by the millions week after week to watch skilled men build something real. The networks took the wrong lesson and chased the shouting. But the hunger they found in that metal shop in New York never went anywhere. So, the chopper boom. A craft that lived underground for decades, dragged into the sunlight. 100 factories built on television and home equity. $30,000 dreams, worth a third of the loan 4 years later. A father and son who built an empire on camera and tore it apart the same way. And a bill, when it finally came, that took the whole thing down in 3 years flat. The chopper didn't die because America stopped loving motorcycles. It died because for one insane decade, America loved them the way it loved everything back then. Too much, too fast, and on borrowed money. So you tell me, who really killed the chopper? The television cameras that made it famous? Or the easy money that made it fake? And if you owned one, a big dog, an iron horse, or something you built yourself in the garage, tell me what you paid, what it was worth after, and whether you would do it again. I want to hear it.